Hello everyone, Ace here, and today I've decided to have yet another look at some video game history, and in the process answer the question, what exactly made MechWarrior 2 great?
This is HQ to any available units. We have mechs down at Nav Gamma. Bravo Cadet reports 4 summoners on site. Bandits are hostile. Repeat, bandits are hostile.
HQ, this is Alpha Assault. I'm on my way, bearing 025.
ETA 34 seconds.
Alpha Assault, this is Bravo Cadet. I've got bandits all over me. Get down here.
Sit tight, Bravo 3. I've got visual.
I've got evacuators out. I'm targeting systems damage. I'm in bad shape.
Enemy detected.
Behind me, 2 of them. Be on the line.
Roger, I've got him.
Targeting.
It's got a lock on me. It's got a lock on me.
Targeting. Warning. Ammunition level critical. Weapon depleted.
Alpha Assault, this is HQ. What is your situation? Alpha Assault, this is HQ. What is your situation? Please comply.
First released all the way back in 1995 for the PC, with some relatively loose ports being made for both the PS1 and the Sega Saturn in 1997, MechWarrior 2, or more specifically the PC version of the game, has gone down in history as being one of the greatest mech sims of all time. It is not just a game that has absolutely defined the mech sim genre, but has also had a massive impact on the video game industry as a whole as well. But to understand why this is the case, let's talk about what exactly made this game great. And the first thing that helped make this game great is the graphics. In 1995, when this game was first released, we were still in the age of 2.5D graphics when it came to games from a first-person perspective. Which is to say that most of the enemies, for example, that you would run into in games from that era would be made out of 2D sprites. MechWarrior 2, by contrast, was very much a game that relied upon 3D models. Admittedly, this alone wasn't completely unique to MechWarrior 2, but the game nevertheless did set a brand new standard, with both how detailed the models themselves were, as well as the fact that they were receiving some basic textures, adding little details like the cockpits and weapon systems being plain to see, in an era where this was actually not that common. Especially when you combine all of that with the game offering resolution support up to 1024 by 768. MechWarrior 2 was a phenomenally looking game from the era, and stood out absolutely amongst its peers in that regard. At least if we're talking about systems that were available at home rather than arcade machines, which themselves were still the graphical and technical powerhouses of the era. And MechWarrior 2 is a game where the graphics would actually improve as years went on due to updated versions being released as well, and that does lead me to another thing that helped make the game great. The fact that it was this game that, more than any other, pushed the need for 3D accelerated graphics cards when it came to the realm of PC gaming. In fact, it was to such a degree that a lot of GPUs that were getting released at that time had their own unique, custom-built, dedicated version of MechWarrior 2 that was provided complimentary to buying the GPU. The game was even made to run on primitive VR headsets in that era. And yes, for the record, VR headsets were technically a thing back in the mid-90s, and MechWarrior 2 ran on them. This sounds like a strange thing to do, but remember this was before the days in which DirectX became standardized. In fact, the original version of MechWarrior 2 was released before the original version of DirectX. And even by the late 90s, DirectX as an API was still facing competition from the likes of Glide. This, combined with the fact that the game got numerous other updated releases over the years, meant that MechWarrior 2 appears to have been released approximately 36 different times from the span of 1995 to 1998. Technically, this number varies depending on what exactly constitutes a different version of MechWarrior 2, but with a number of those re-releases including the game also being bundled with joysticks and sound cards. But even then, you're talking about a game that got re-released a ridiculous amount of times. Compare this, if you will, to the 9 different releases of Skyrim that took place over the span of 14 years, and it really does put to perspective just how popular MechWarrior 2 was when it was released. But so far I've been talking about the technical advances of this game, which are, let's be honest, the stuff of legend, but they are not the only things that helped make the game great. Another thing that helped make the game great was, of course, the gameplay. MechWarrior 2 absolutely is a case of a game earning the title of simulator. The controls, for example, do set a new standard in terms of complexity for mech sims of the era, as you can see by comparing MechWarrior 2 to Earthsiege 2, both of which coming out in the same year. Yet at the exact same time, MechWarrior 2 is not a slow-paced game. Sure, it's not as fast-paced as your typical first-person shooter, particularly from the era, but it was still very much an action-packed game that just so happened to have a fair amount of attention to detail. And this attention to detail would impact the gameplay in more ways than one, which does lead to another thing that helped make the game great: the sheer amount to which you could customize your mech. Now, mech customization was a thing before MechWarrior 2, of course, as for example the original Earthsiege from 1994 gave options such as the ability to mount different weapons on different hardpoints. MechWarrior 2, though, took this to a whole new level. You could fit your weapons pretty much wherever the hell you wanted in MechWarrior 2, but not only that, you also had complete customization of the amount of armor for specific parts of your mech, as well as how beefy your engines are going to be, the number of heat sinks you have to cool off your mech, as well as any additional equipment such as jump jets that you want to put on your mech. The amount of customization that MechWarrior 2 offered was nothing short of robust and impressive, and it's no wonder why fans remember it in particular so fondly. In fact, one of the few notable downsides to this system was the fact that you weren't really strapped for any real resources in the base game of MechWarrior 2. You didn't really have to worry about logistics or finances interfering with your ability to build the exact mech you wanted, but that was ultimately something that got addressed with the next thing that helped make this game great: the standalone Mercenaries expansion. It is of note that MechWarrior 2 would in fact have 2 separate expansions over the course of its lifetime: the Ghost Bear's Legacy expansion, and much more importantly, MechWarrior 2 Mercenaries. Mercenaries took the core gameplay of MechWarrior 2 and turned it essentially into a non-linear sandbox, with the player now being tasked roaming around the galaxy with their own mercenary company, maintaining the existing equipment with the finances on hand, as well as of course buying new mechs when possible, whilst taking on the specific missions that you want in the name of cold hard cash. This expansion is exactly what MechWarrior 2 needed. It's exactly as much of a blast to play as you might expect just from the description alone. Already we've covered plenty of reasons why MechWarrior 2 is a great game, but I do believe there is one final thing that I do need to bring up: the soundtrack. MechWarrior 2 stood out for having some really good music from the era, and it's music that is rather unique. MechWarrior 2's soundtrack can be best described as a combination of tribalistic, militaristic, and futuristic. A somewhat bizarre combination, but one that fits perfectly with the theme, and completely encapsulates what the clans are as far as the setting of Battletech is concerned. While it is of note that in order to fully appreciate the soundtrack, you'd need to track down earlier copies of the game, as later copies would cut down on the soundtrack due to sheer lack of disk space, yet the game's music has stood out so well that people have remembered it fondly for decades since. So in summary, MechWarrior 2 is a game that revolutionized graphics within the video game industry, championed the push for 3D accelerated graphics cards, set a new standard for mech simulation, had an absolutely fantastic expansion pack that took the original concept in a whole new direction, and on top of all of that had a great soundtrack to boot. With all of this in mind, this has been Ace, and I hope you'll agree when I say that MechWarrior 2 is great.